Hey everyone! Welcome back to TV Buzz Zone. Today we're pitting the two titans of the TVD universe against each other. The OG teen drama that started it all versus the darker, more mature spin-off it spawned. Is it the epic romances of Mystic Falls or the brutal family bonds of New Orleans that truly reign supreme? This one's definitely gonna get messy. Spoiler alert, this video contains major plot points from both the Vampire Diaries and the originals. Round 1. The main character. Let's start with the heart of each show. Who did a better job of carrying the narrative? The Vampire Diaries revolved around Elena. She was the anchor, the reason the brothers stayed, and the object of almost every villain's desire. The show worked because you were invested in her journey and who she would choose. It was a classic coming-of-age story wrapped in a supernatural bow. The originals was built around a villain. A show where a powerful, unhinged anti-hero is the protagonist is a bold choice, but it actually worked. Klaus, with 1,000 years of history and a war raging inside him, was a lead of many layers, fueled by a brutal and untamed love for his family. He wasn't just reacting to events, he was the cause of them. TVD's reliance on Elena made it a very strong, romance-driven series, but the narrative was always anchored to her life as a high school student. In contrast, making a 1,000-year-old villain the lead meant the show had a bottomless well of history, ancient grudges, and endless possibilities to pull from, which allowed for a much grander and more unpredictable story. Point to the originals. Round 2. The villains. A supernatural show is only as good as its big bads. TVD gave us some of the most iconic villains in modern television history. First, there was Damon, a villain who was anything but one-dimensional. He was a ruthless chess player who had a plan and could outthink anyone in the room. Despite that, you couldn't help but empathize with the fact that all he wanted to do was save the one he loved. Then came Catherine, a master manipulator who was both a fantastic foil and a twisted reflection of our hero. She was always a century ahead in her planning. And Kai Parker? He was a charismatic psychotic monster who brought a pure, unadulterated sense of fun to his evil. We also can't forget the villains who were so good they got their own show, Klaus and Elijah. While it might be a little unfair to count them here, their introduction on TVD brought a level of brutal power and sophistication the show had never seen before. Elijah, with his immaculate suits and code of honor, was a different kind of threat. He was calm yet lethal. Klaus was a terrifying whirlwind of rage and paranoia. He was a force of nature that made our hero's problems feel microscopic. The original's antagonists were often just other members of the Mikaelson family, Marcel and his army, or the Coven of Witches. The protagonists were never truly at risk of dying because they were way more powerful than the villains. The only real exception was Dahlia until the upgraded originals came along. Lucien was a blend of charming and utterly unhinged, with a motive that was both deeply personal and a centuries-long vendetta against Klaus for his role in his humiliation. He was a master manipulator who could outthink the Mikaelsons and had a plan to usurp their power and escape their shadow forever. But as a full-fledged, upgraded original, he became a bit underwhelming toying with his enemies when he had the chance to kill them. It wasn't until Marcel became the Beast that the show gave us a villain who was both a true physical threat and a tragic, broken-hearted character you could empathize with. He was the only one who had every right to hate them and a power that could finally end them. Unfortunately, the final seasons were centered around a villain who was more of a magical plot device, the Hollow. This ancient, disembodied witch felt more like a hurricane than a character, and her power felt so overwhelming it made the Mikaelsons look so weak. For the sheer terror, unpredictability, and iconic status of its villains, point to TVD. Round 3. World building and lore. Who gave us a richer, more believable supernatural world? The Vampire Diaries had Mystic Falls, a small town with a lot of secrets. It introduced us to vampires, werewolves, witches, hybrids, immortals, sirens, and more. It was a chaotic, fast-paced world where new threats were constantly popping up, but sometimes the rules felt like they were changing on the fly. The originals gave us a living, breathing city with its own history. New Orleans had distinct factions: vampires, witches, and the Crescent Wolves, each with its own politics, history, and power struggles. The lore was more cohesive, and the rules of the supernatural felt more established and respected. You felt the weight of centuries of conflict and tradition in every episode. For its consistent, complex, and layered world building, point to the originals. Round 4. The stakes. When a hero's life is on the line, who made us feel it more? The Vampire Diaries had a serious problem with death. Characters were constantly dying, coming back to life, dying again, and then getting resurrected. The stakes felt low because a character's death rarely felt permanent. It was often a plot device to set up a new storyline and not an emotional gut punch. This was most clear with characters like Jeremy, who died and was resurrected multiple times. It felt like a constant resurrection cycle where Alaric, Catherine, Stefan, Damon, Elena, Bonnie, and even Tyler all died and came back often more than once. In the originals, death felt a lot more final. When major characters died, they stayed dead with only a few exceptions. This made every battle, every sacrifice, and every moment of betrayal feel more significant. You were genuinely worried for the characters because the writers weren't afraid to let them go. The deaths of Cammy, Hayley, Josh, Aiden, Finn, Esther, and Michael were all brutal and irreversible. The ultimate final sacrifice of Klaus and Elijah cemented that death in this show had real consequences. For its willingness to let life and death have real consequences, point to the originals. Round 5. Character growth. Which show did a better job of transforming its characters? The Vampire Diaries excelled in how it developed its characters. Caroline went from a shallow, insecure teenager to a powerful, compassionate vampire. Bonnie went from a timid high school witch to one of the most powerful and selfless characters in the entire universe, while Damon's journey from a self-loathing monster to a reluctant hero who found redemption was a defining arc of the franchise. The Originals was a show about a family that was stuck. The Mikaelsons spent 1,000 years betraying and forgiving each other, and while we saw their motivations and vulnerabilities, their fundamental nature remained unchanged. Klaus, Elijah, and Rebekah were essentially the same characters they were on TVD, just with more backstory. Their defining feature was their inability to truly change. For the incredible transformative arcs of its characters, point to TVD. Round 6. Pacing and consistency. The Vampire Diaries had an electric start. Seasons 1 to 3 are widely considered some of the best television in the genre. But after that, the quality became inconsistent. Plot lines grew convoluted, characters were sidelined, and the central love triangle lost its footing after Nina's departure. The Originals was remarkably consistent from start to finish. The story never lost its focus on the Mikaelson family and their city. It had a shorter run, which meant the writers had a clear vision for the beginning, middle, and end, allowing them to stick the landing with a powerful and emotional final season. For its focused narrative and consistent quality, point to the Originals. Round 7. The supporting cast. Beyond the main characters, who made the world feel alive? The Vampire Diaries had a phenomenal supporting cast that often stole the show. This includes Caroline and Bonnie, whose character journeys played a crucial role as previously highlighted in Round 5. It also applies to characters like Alaric, who grew from a history teacher into a beloved father figure and crucial protector. Even characters like Jeremy, Matt, Tyler, and Enzo had rich, layered stories that made them more than just sidekicks. The Originals had a great supporting cast too, but they were almost always defined by their relationships to the Mikaelsons. Davina, Cammy, Josh, and Jackson were fantastic, but their lives and arcs were completely at the mercy of the Mikaelsons. The one exception to this was Marcel, who, after being a central figure in Season 1 and frustratingly sidelined in Season 2, came roaring back as the MVP of Season 3. The show was so focused on the main family that it sometimes forgot to give its supporting players true independence. For the development and independence of its secondary characters, point to TVD. Round 8. The final sacrifice. Let's talk about the final act. The Vampire Diaries had a messy but ultimately fitting end. Stefan's final sacrifice to save his brother and the town was a heartbreaking full-circle moment that redeemed his character and gave Elena the human life she always wanted with Damon. The Originals had a tragic but powerful final sacrifice. Klaus and Elijah's decision to die together as the ultimate act of love to save Hope and ensure the Mikaelson family could finally be free was the perfect ending. It cemented the show's central theme of family and proved that even the most broken bonds could be mended in the end. Both were beautiful, But Klaus and Elijah's shared sacrifice was the single most powerful moment in the entire universe. Point to the originals. The Vampire Diaries was a thrilling ride with iconic characters and a fantastic beginning. It created a world we couldn't get enough of. But the originals took that world and made it better. It traded teenage melodrama for mature, complex storytelling, and its focused narrative and brutal sacrifices gave us a show that felt more powerful and complete. But hey, that's just our take. Did we make the right call, or are you ready to duel us at dawn? Let us know in the comments below, and please, don't hold back. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for updates. If you enjoyed this video, don't miss our comparisons playlists with topics like Twilight versus The Vampire Diaries, Klaus versus Marcel, Klaus versus Michael Corvin, and Stelena versus Delena. You can also check out our cast updates playlist covering The Vampire Diaries, the originals, Twilight, and Teen Wolf. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.